Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Mark Kate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 71. We're going to be talking about the Netflix documentary series Tiger King, Murder, Mayhem, and Madness by Rebecca Chaiklin and Eric Good from 2020. Hope I'm pronouncing that name right. You can email us at whatthe@scarythoughts.org and also sign up for our newsletter at that same address, scarythoughts.org. And let's just get right into it. The only thing to say before we start is spoilers ahead, even though it's a true story.
And there's not really actually a whole lot to spoil. Like every time I would tell my wife something about the show, she'd be like, no spoilers, no spoilers. I'm like, it's not really a plot. So, yeah, there's nothing to talk about.
Yeah, although if Carol Baskin went to prison and hung herself in jail, that would be like a spoiler for sure, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I believe everyone, well, not everyone's alive. The one dude dies.
Yeah, but he's such a side character. And you know that Joe Exotic is speaking from prison early in the documentary. So the one thing that might be a surprise is taken away from you at the beginning. Although, there are twists and turns for sure. But I guess they're not really twists. They're not really like something that could be spoiled. It's more like, Jesus Christ, now this,
Yeah, I mean, and then definitely like all documentaries, there is a heavy narrative hand from the directors. There are definitely some choices that were made that I think add to the drama when maybe there wasn't as much drama in real life. I mean, there's definitely enough crazy shit that went on to, like, if you lived next to these people and you told your friends about them, your friends would be captivated by the weird shit.
Yeah.
But I don't think this at all deserved 7 episodes of a show, of a series. I mean, it was like really tedious to get through.
Yeah. I remember when we talked about covering this around the time of our last episode, we had decided we'd do it. And you said, maybe I'll just watch the first episode. And I suggested, well, no, I think we actually have to get through the whole thing to actually cover it properly. And then after I got through 2 episodes, I was totally regretting committing to this.
Yeah, this is also in general like one of the reasons why I don't really advocate for doing seasons of shows for episodes, because I feel like to really nail it down, I always feel like I need to watch the thing 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, which I've done countless times for True Detective, so that was no problem. But I was thinking about, if we would maybe cover the anime series Tokyo Ghoul, because it looks kind of cool, even though I hate cartoons. Something about it's really interesting to me. But I was like, man, I'm not going to watch 4 seasons of an anime twice. Like, there's no fucking way. Even if it's great, I'm just not going to. And then when I think you might have suggested that we do this, and I just remember looking at the number of episodes and being like, fuck, I don't want to have anything to do with this.
But after finishing the whole arc, I do find that probably 99% of what we're going to talk about could be gleaned from just watching 1 episode.
I mean, you could get it from the memes, to be honest.
Yeah. This show is not about the narrative arc. It is the rhetorical stance that the documentary is taking more than anything.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reality show, like freak show is all it is, really. It's and it kind of, I don't want to say, I guess disappointing is the right word to use. Like I'm kind of disappointed that Netflix has something like this and is pushing it, because they were doing really kind of interesting shows and programming. Like, Stranger Things is a pretty cool, interesting thing. I haven't watched Ozark, but everybody seems to love that. A lot of the original programming was really interesting. And one of the things that the people who work on it all say is, like, the Netflix company just kind of stays out of it. And to me, this sort of is like the harbinger of what I think is going to happen to Netflix and streaming in general. Is it's just going to be streaming reality. And it's going to be a little edgier because it's not on TV, but it's just going to be the same cheeseburger content that people hated and went to Netflix for, in the first place.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, although it is a situation where Netflix is just producing an ocean of content,
Mm-hmm.
and it's easy to not really notice because back before all the streaming that's happening, you would know about TV shows that you weren't interested in because of billboards and TV ads and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But now, the way that things are pushed at you, the Netflix algorithms can push 1,000 shitty TV shows at you that you don't think you're interested in, and you might not even notice them because it's so
Mm-hmm.
easy to not notice ads on websites and extra content that are, we're always being bombarded with. It's easy to just sort of scroll past it all. And so it's easy to not really take notice how much original content Netflix has. And then occasionally they'll come up with something like Ozark. It's pretty good, but there's an ocean of terrible underneath Ozark. And I think this one just popped up because of novelty, not because of Netflix went all in on Tiger King. I think they might have just got a bit lucky with this one at the right time. I feel like it's not just a source of memes, but it is a meme. It was the first thing that someone messaged me that I should do since I'm going to be stuck at home was, oh, I just saw this thing. You should watch it. And
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
what it is.
it's weird though, because it's also kind of disappointing even for that. Like, because definitely people have been like, "Oh, have you seen that show?" But it's not like, "Oh, have you seen that? Holy shit, you have to see it." Like, no one has said you have to see this show. Although I did hear in some podcasts when it first came out, like on Joe Rogan's show, like some guest was like, "Oh, dude, you got to see Tiger King. You're gonna love it." And that's a dude that's obsessed with tigers eating people. So the show is like right up his alley.
Right.
But yeah, well, I mean, why this show for a horror show? I mean, I know we kind of go beyond horror a little bit, but like, what is it about this that made you want to cover it, other than the crass attempt to grab the moment?
I think that it just came across as so tawdry. I don't know what else to say. It also is about power and control and violence.
Mm.
And, we might be stretching the bounds of talking about it in terms of horror, but it definitely does touch on a lot of themes that we discuss on this show all the time. So it might not be easy to discuss as horror, but it definitely fits into scary thoughts, because it's like guns, the South, violence.
Transgender people.
Yeah,
That's another. Yeah, it definitely checks a lot of scary thoughts boxes.
right.
Okay, so do you think that this show has camp value? Like, I mean, I guess I'll just answer it right away. I don't think the show is camp, but I think characters in the show are camp.
I think it's camp for straight people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, some of the characters are a bit campy, but I feel like there might be just a little too gross in some sense to be
Mm-hmm.
that campy. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, gross though. I mean, John Waters films can be gross, and they're definitely camp. So I
Yeah.
think the grossness is maybe part of it.
Well, I think there's yeah, this is difficult territory. I think there are different kinds of gross. Joe Exotic and John Waters are both different kinds of gross, and I think that one way in which that's the case is their self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
John Waters is wholly meta as he's in it, and that is how he can play with camp. Whereas I think Joe Exotic I think he's self-aware in a certain sense, but not in another. I think he,
Yeah.
I think he knows it's all a game, but I
Yeah.
don't think he really knows. Like, I don't think he's really in control.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I don't know about the control thing, but like he's definitely like made choices to present himself in a certain way, right? He definitely has a certain style about him.
Yeah.
Like, it's not like he's like one of these fucking hoodie everyday tech drones that were around, that were like I basically am.
For sure.
But the very moment you meet him, he doesn't want to take his hat off at first because he's like, oh, they all see that I have this crazy mullet. I always wondered about like mullets and can I speak to your manager haircuts where people like have, it's like you have to know that that's a joke haircut. You know what I mean? Like the comedian Theo Vaughn has a pretty outrageous mullet. and he's kind of aware that it's like a thing, as does the rapper Riff Raff, who has probably the best mullet in the game right now. And those mullets are ironic, but there's like nothing ironic about Joe Exotic's mullet. It seems to be exactly how he would really want to have his hair, because it feels like an early 90s country star move.
Yeah.
Which just seems to be what he's trying to do. Like, to me, he just looks like if Garth Brooks was in the Bad Batch, you know?
That's pretty good. I got a sense going into this episode that there was some aspect of this that when you were comparing it to a reality show, you were expressing a distaste for that. And I was wondering if you could articulate that in some way.
Yeah.
Do you find it's exploitative? Are you like, well, I mean, I think it is, but what about this bothers you in that sense?
Well, I guess, okay, so I'm going to be a bit hypocritical, because it's not like I won't watch something that is wild and crazy. Like, for example, there was a YouTube channel called The War in Chirac, which was basically about like Chicago street gangs and all the crazy shit they did. And that was like fascinating to me because it's so wild and weird and unlike my world. But my watching of it was out of curiosity. I never looked down on it. You know what I mean? Like, there's never a moment where I was like, oh man, these fucked up kids, they're so fucking lame. I hate them. You know, and I didn't feel superior watching the lives of these gang kids. I think this show is made to make you feel superior to these people. And I think that's just fucked up. Like, I mean, I definitely feel like I'll make better choices than some other people, and some people are just fucking lame. But I never really judge the people and I don't ever look down on anybody. I might hate somebody, but I never like put myself over them. And that's the thing that bothers me about the show is it's like, and in general, it's like, I hate how Hollywood portrays the South. I fucking hate it. And like, the thing is, it's like, you only get weird people like this when you have a little bit of freedom, you know? And it's, I know it sounds crazy, but it's almost like people are jealous that people like this exist and live this way, and they want you to hate them. Like, there's like some agenda to make you hate them. I mean, even Carol Baskin, you know, like this like weird animal rights people hate animal rights people, and like they want to like feel superior to them. It's like when you're a vegetarian and people give you shit at a barbecue, you know? It's like, what do you care? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot that I just blasted out there, but I just hate this kind of shit.
Well, what do you think it's saying about the South?
Well, I mean, I don't think it's probably saying anything about the South broadly. Like, it's not explicitly like that. But, you know, that movie, The Hunt, just came out, and I don't want to have any there's no spoilers for that here. But, you know, there are really crazy, ultra-liberal, elite characters. That's how they're portrayed in the film. And there's, like, really awful, deplorable characters. And both of those characters are written in a way to allow you, the person who is able to watch it and be above it all, with like to be able to look at it with disdain. And this show is kind of the same. Like, you have the animal rights person on one side, and then you have this like crazy wild libertarian dude on the other side. And it reminds me of that David Foster Wallace essay about television, where he talked about like we're in this like final stage of society because we're trapped by irony. And it's like you have like these shows are just trapped in ironic detachment. And then David Foster Wallace talked about it, how it's like Married with Children was like the show that brought it all on, which is like, you're watching a sitcom, but it's also making fun of sitcoms. So you're like in on the joke. So you're sort of privileged, but you're not really privileged because you're just a fucking joker sitting on the couch. Like, I guarantee almost all the people who watch this show are living fucking boring lives compared to Joe Exotic, you know?
Sure, but I think the thing that's complicated about, you know, we can talk about issues of representation and maybe that it's exploitative in some way. Like, you know, one sense in which it is a very concrete way in which the gaze of the camera betrays a certain kind of exploitation is John Finlay, Joe's husband. He actually got his teeth fixed.
Yeah, they asked him to not have his fixed teeth in the show.
Yeah, they cut out all of the interviews with him where he had his teeth fixed so that he would always look like that.
Yeah.
That's pretty sketchy.
I think it's super fucked up. And the thing is, it's like all these people who, I mean, I'll say these people, like, I mean, look, you made a documentary, you're on Netflix, you're probably like an insider of some sort, right? I don't know anything about these filmmakers, but I assume they probably didn't vote for Trump. You know what I mean? And their decision to portray this dude in a certain way, I think is just fucking deplorable, man. Like, I mean, I get why you do it, but it's as bad as the people with like the type of politics that I imagine the directors of this film have. And again, I don't know. I just read a couple interviews with them, and I'm projecting here. But you're never allowed to punch down or make fun of people or whatever. All that always seems to go out the window when the South is concerned, though. It's like you can make fun of people at Walmart or whatever, but like these are poor people, the same poor people that you pretend to care about when they come from another country or an inner city. Like you end up with fucked up teeth and fucked up ailments and missing limbs and shit like that. You know, like that's just what happens when you don't have any money. And to kind of make that a spectacle.
I totally agree. I think that part of that, I think there's a resentment that happens because what's odd about the way America is designed as a democracy, in quotes, is that those people, right? Also in quote, like let's put that in italics, have more voting power than the blue states, right? So people who don't vote for Trump, they look at these people from the South who are struggling and are able to be baffled why those folks have stronger political weight and actually make so many of the political decisions in this country. That part of the ethos of America is this no tyranny ethos.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the political decisions that are decided about, let's say, California, are made in the South, are made in the flyover states, right? For example, you brought up Trump. Trump was not elected because of the people who make documentaries on Netflix, right? And
Well, I think
there becomes a resentment where, and I'm not excusing it. I'm just sort of saying, like, when you look at some poor motherfuckers who are just trying to get by and your heart bleeds for them, but then they actually have more political power than you and are making shitty decisions about their own lives and yours. I think it's part of the American character, this divide between red and blue states.
Yeah, I think the divide between red and blue states is different than a lot of people think. I mean, to me, the characteristic of the Southerner, the kind of person I identify with, is a person who's kind of an individual, wants to do their thing, and ultimately wants to be left the fuck alone. Yeah. Like that to me is like the gold standard libertarian Southerner, right? I mean, and I know it gets really messy in other ways. Whereas I feel like the gold standard progressive is the person that thinks that we can all make things better together. And that's like a noble effort. But better for some people isn't better for all people, right? I think, well, one of the things I was thinking about was how there's this like narrative that people voted for Trump because they're fucking dumb, right? Like the people I know that voted for Trump they're not all in the South. I'll tell you that much. There's a surprising number of people from the Bay Area that I know personally that voted for Trump. And I didn't because I don't vote, period. But I don't think I would have voted for him at the time anyway. But I think there's a lot of people who are like, look, neither one of these parties have done fuck for me as a poor person. Like not one, right? Like all the welfare, all that stuff, that was put in a long time ago. Like people, like all that shit, that's like 80s, 90s stuff. Like, so they're talking like the current batch of politicians. What have any of these people ever done for me? And there's one side that seems to tell me how to live, and then one side that doesn't. So I'm going to go with the side that doesn't. And so I think the undercurrent, like the actual characteristic isn't dumbness. It's just this weird irascibility. Like, mm-hmm. I mean, I don't go anywhere, right? Like I'm a homebody. This stay-at-home order has not been much of a problem to me. But the moment I saw cops arresting a fucking wakeboarder out on the water by himself for like violating like stay-at-home orders, I immediately wanted to go fucking outside. As soon as I saw the mayor of New York, the mayor of LA talking about how, you know, they wanted people to turn in people for violating the shelter-in-place order, I was like, fuck that. I want to go outside with like 40 motorcycles and just run around and cough on things. Like, I mean, it's just weird. There's just this, even though I know that's not the right thing to do, there's just something in my character, and I think a lot of people from the South, that you just have an absolute hatred of authority. Mm-hmm. Fuck people.
I mean, sticking on or going back to, we were talking about representation and how the South is portrayed. I think that our traditional ways of thinking about how representation operates in media is not what it used to be, because we can look at this documentary and think like, oh, it's exploitative of these people and blah, blah, blah. Well, two things. One, you just point a camera at Joe Exotic and he does the work for himself. But actually,
I don't like him as a stand-in for the South in general. He's just a weird individual character who probably could have only come from the South. Like, I don't think he represents the South.
For sure. But the other thing is that, okay, this is a subject that I brought up many times on this podcast, where I think that it's hard to know what people are thinking anymore, because the shittiest opinions always rise, and we just don't know what's going on anymore. It's just so fucking chaotic. If you look online, people love Joe Exotic. People hate Carol Baskin, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting.
So the guy who is sort of framed as the deplorable in this documentary, this guy who runs around waving a pistol with his finger on the trigger at his friends, the guy who threatens this woman's life constantly, will not shut his fucking mouth for a second. People just love him.
Yeah.
However, this woman who, we can question her intentions, but, you know, she's pretty like calm, cold, and collected.
Yeah, it's weird.
People are so ready to believe that she murdered her husband.
Yes.
But Joe Exotic threatened to kill this woman over and over and over and over.
And kind of tried to.
Yes.
Like, ultimately,
and he's in jail for it. But somehow he's the hero.
Yeah.
It's just, so that's where we live now.
This is part of my theory of like how I think that like you're really like, I guess I'm stuck with using these words, but you're like cartoonish ultra liberal, the kind that like you would see on Portlandia or made fun of, and like we all know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
That person, I feel, is in a way jealous of your Danny McBride from This Is the End type character. You know what I mean? There's just a natural exuberance, and there's just something more fun about a wild ass person that doesn't give a fuck, as opposed to someone who gives too much of a fuck. Like, which is like, that's the difference between Carol, you know, like Carol Baskin is this person who cares about animal rights and all this stuff. And it's like, all the memes are so negative to her. And it's like, I kind of don't understand the moment. This is a person who is presumably a rape survivor, like somebody who has been through some really, really dark shit. And then, you know, it paints this whole idea about how she's such a hypocrite because she bred and raised tigers with her husband. But the deal is, like, you can change your opinion about something and still have echoes of it in your life. For example, I have French bulldogs. I think breeding these dogs is super fucked up, but I still have two of them. You know what I mean? Like, if I could snap my fingers and make people stop breeding them, I probably would, just based on like ours have like all these fucked up health problems, as many of them do. But it doesn't mean I don't really care about this little creature and I wouldn't rescue them. You know what I mean? So like, that's like a really one way of looking at Carol Baskin is like, yeah, maybe she and her husband raised and bred these animals and whatever, but her facility, if you go look it up online and look at the people who have, she has all these certifications from really credible rescue sites. And it seems like she's doing the work that she says she's doing, which is trying to eliminate all these weird little roadside zoos. And I don't know if you've ever been to one, but they are fucked up. Like, I've been to a few of them.
No, I've never been.
Yeah, there was one that we used to go to for field trips when I was a little kid in Louisiana. And it was an alligator farm. And you would just go in there and it smelled so fucking terrible. And there were just alligators like all over the place on top of each other. And what was really sad is in this one room, they had a fucking gorilla. So you go in this like big stone, it's like this stone prison, and there was this sad ape just sitting there looking at you. Like, it looked like a prisoner, you know, and like, man, that thing's not having any sort of good life. And then there's like these famous tigers that are at a gas station in East Texas that I've seen that are pretty sad. And yeah, I don't know. Like, so those things are fucked up. So I could see wanting to end them. And that seems like it's kind of noble, but that whole mission is really framed as like she's like a hypocritical enemy of liberty,
Yeah.
in the film. And it's just weird.
Well, but I think one thing that divides the two of them, aside from just their political stances, is the way that they approach them. Because as you were
Mm-hmm.
saying, like Joe Exotic is this sort of like wild man reference. And he sort of wields power through violence, through threats, through carrying and waving a pistol. Whereas the way she wields power is institutional power. It's very
Yeah,
typical. It's very typically
it,
left wing, where
it's also violence.
you rely
Like,
on the government to do your dirty work for you, and
yeah,
that way you can keep your hands clean.
yeah, it's one of the differences between like how people think of power is like some people think, well, I'm going to make this government official point his gun at you. How is that better than me pointing my gun at you?
Right.
It's super fucked up. Like, it's like people don't think that what they're doing is violent, but like, she tried to completely destroy his finances. You know what I mean? And it's like, it's one thing to say, like, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into animal rights territory here, but all over the country, people have thousands of fucking cows, and they're allowed to do whatever the fuck they want with them to create steaks and cheeseburgers and shit. But this dude can't have some tigers to attract some sideshow money. I mean, what are we saying here? They're not actually wild animals. They're like bred in captivity for this purpose, just like a cow is bred for a purpose in captivity. And if this one yokel with a cowboy hat is allowed to have cows, why isn't this other yokel with a cowboy hat allowed to have tigers?
But, she did try to destroy him economically because she's trying to put an end to something she sees as unfair business practices.
Mm-hmm.
He stole her logo.
Hilarious.
He
Hilarious.
What she was doing was actually like, it's political, it's legitimate. You don't like something, you try to figure out a way to end it. He threatened to kill her. She did no such thing to him. And you can say that state power is a form of violence, but there is a difference between threatening to kill someone and using the government to leverage your beliefs in how a society should be run.
Yeah, I think though, to me, like whenever you fuck with somebody's money, whether it's both, it's like whether it's ill-gotten or not, when you fuck with somebody's money, it's basically fucking with somebody's livelihood and in a very abstract way, their ability to eat, right? So this dude, I mean, we've seen his pizza making skills. They're not great.
Nope.
So what else is he going to do but have a fucking weird tiger freak show? Right.
But the funny thing is, I can't speak for her, but I have no doubt that if he was like, you know what, I'm going to run this business legit. I still love tigers and big cats, but I'm going to do this the right way, in a way that we can all agree on. I don't think Carol Baskin would continue to go after him.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
it wasn't because it wasn't personal. It became personal when he made it more personal.
Yeah, I think if he were to like convert over to her model, that she would probably have left him alone. But then again, her model, like, it's just a totally different way of thinking about things. Like,
sure.
Like my wife, she's on all these vegan mailing lists, right? And so there's all these sanctuary farms all over the place that like, donate to us and we'll, keep these cows alive on this farm and they're going to live this bucolic lifestyle. It's like you're basically asking for money to support your petting zoo, which is noble or not, I don't care. But it's like, it's not a straight service. It's like this weird, like morality marketing. Like, oh, you should support this because you're a good person. But are you a bad person because you want to fucking pet a tiger kitten? And then like one of the points he makes in the show, I think is kind of interesting, is he talks about, and this is completely self-serving, I don't buy it as being a real reason for him, but these people see and touch these tigers when they're young and they have like a lifelong connection to them and they go and support big cat conservation all around the world. I think there's probably something to that, but who knows? Like, I mean, for me personally, just to put it out where I stand, I think all this shit is fucked up. I don't think like people should own big ass dangerous animals that can't like non-domesticatable animals. You know what I mean? Like I think it's just fucked up to keep an animal that should be running around in a cage. Like
Well,
I just think
that's the difference between owning a cow and owning a tiger, you know?
yeah. Yeah, well, cow's a completely domesticated animal.
Yep.
You know, and then as are dog. I mean, as are dogs, as are horses. Or you know, there's a bunch of shit that you could have, but there isn't like the feel of like power from having those animals. Like that's another really interesting thing is like all these people who vibe off of being around this really dangerous thing. It's like oh, I'm so powerful that I can
Yep.
control this thing that could eat my face. And then I think the lamest people are like the people who would probably go out of their way, you know, some stripper with big titties and an Instagram account, go to Las Vegas and get a picture taken with a kitten, or, you know, for Instagram likes or something like that. To me, that is like, it's almost like, you know, not blaming the Mexican cartels. It's like blaming the fucking people in America who want to do all the drugs. Like
Right.
that, there's some sort of thing there too.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it's at almost no point in this documentary are the cats really seen as what they are.
Mm-hmm.
They are for Joe Exotic, for Bhagwan Antle, for even Carol Baskin. They are all there as their sign value.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of Carol Baskin somewhat, this is all sort of an extension of conspicuous consumption.
But she's also kind of a martyr too. Like that's like her deal.
Sure,
Like
sure.
she's the person who's saving these cats, and she
Right.
like I mean, and there's something super atavistic about it for her because every single item of clothing she has
Yes.
animal prints on it. So she's basically like a tiger drag queen.
Totally. So it's not that she is not doing this thing; it's that it operates differently.
Mm.
Her whole relationship to cats and being their savior is different from this sort of like wielding of patriarchal power that, you know, I'm going to get so much pussy. I have the biggest balls in the room because I have big cats, you know, because I joust with these big deadly animals. And like most demonstrations of power that are like that, it's embarrassing and sad.
Yeah.
But the weird thing is that it works and people buy into it. I mean, it reminds me of Donald Trump's red power tie. Have I talked about this before?
I feel like he might have, but I don't remember.
Oh, just the 80s power tie. It's like the strong move. Some scientists decided that we react a certain way to a man in a red tie. So men started wearing red power ties.
Mm-hmm.
But then we know that. So when you see a red power tie, it's obvious what the manipulation is. It's not a style choice. It's a style choice that has an intended consequence. And if you see through it, it's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah.
And that's, to me, Donald Trump's entire thing. His entire life is a power tie where he does the thing that powerful people do. And it's embarrassing, but then actually people do think it's admirable.
Yeah, because it's sometimes, well, like, it reminds me of, like, sometimes the dude in a submission fighter t-shirt is some fucking jabroni that hangs out at the mall. And then sometimes it's a submission fighter. You know, and
Right.
it's like when the sign is easily accessible, like you could just buy a t-shirt or whatever, then that message can get blurred a little bit. It's kind of like what made me think of that is I remember one night when I was still bartending, there's a pop scene, the indie rock Britpop night. This really tall, kind of like hipstery dude was like really obnoxious on the dance floor, which would also often happen there. And he starts jumping around and he keeps bumping into this short, stocky, what to me is clearly a Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioner because he has the body, you know, the short, stocky, big shoulder body, the totally fucked up ears, and a t-shirt that says submission fighter on it. And
okay.
It's like, and this dude, this tall, like Morrissey looking dude, fucking slaps him. Like, and like I saw it. It was like 10 feet away from the bar, and this dude smiles, and then the tall guy just disappears. Like you just don't see him, and then all of a sudden the crowd splits off, and the dude is completely mounted on top of this guy. And I thought this was a totally classy move. Instead of just beating the fuck out of this dude, he was just left and right with the same hand, giving him like a cartoon pimp slap, which
That's
was
great.
like one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And then when I saw the whole thing, so we threw the tall dude out and let the submission fighter guy stay in, which is pretty hilarious. That's a total tangent. But my point of it is sometimes the sign is weird, but like you do kind of have to be at least a certain kind of person with a certain amount of resources to keep a big fucking crazy cat around. So it kind of does say something about you. Can you hear the snoring?
Just barely.
Okay, yeah.
It's pretty funny.
If
It's not
anybody
too
can
bad.
hear the snoring into this recording, it's because my little sweet French bulldog is sleeping on my lap and he snores.
That shouldn't be bred because they breathe that way.
Look, he's adorable, but he should not exist.
Sorry, little guy. Also, to talk about Donald Trump a little more, this documentary seemed so much like the last presidential election because
Two bad choices.
totally no. You've got on one side this doesn't give a fuck, will not shut up, just spews nonsense and hatred and self contradictions constantly, ridiculous hair,
Mutants.
surrounded by people who mutants who will support anything he does or says,
Yeah.
and people want to take him down. And on the other side, we've got someone who is somehow more hated because of the way she represents institutional power.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, kind of from money in a weird sort of way. Obviously, also a fucking weirdo. Like I mean,
Yeah.
if you see that picture of her and the newer husband, and the newer husband's like on a leash like a cat, and he's wearing like no shirt.
Love that picture.
Oh, it's just so weird.
It's beautiful. They're in love.
Yeah, I guess she's like the ultimate furry.
Yeah. Oh, no, for sure. Absolutely.
I want to talk about the actual construction of the film and the quality of it. Like, it is not a very good looking documentary. Like, it's kind of like a compact, tight, shitty looking film.
Yeah, but I don't know if you can give it the Errol Morris treatment because it is a lot of sort of gaudy, tacky, rundown people. You want to point the camera at the dirty tiger cage and catch some nonsense rather than long, languorous tracking shots of the South or something like that.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more like Gummo. Like, even though that's fiction, like
Yeah.
there's a way of shooting that stuff that I don't want to say glamorizes it, but I mean that's the closest word I can think of. It's like it adds like a little bit of nobility to the strangeness. Might be like a way of saying it. Not that anybody here deserves nobility, but I just think like the show just seems like a bad Jerry Springer episode that just goes on for way too long.
Yeah, for sure. But I think it does border into premium mediocre.
Oh, it's thoroughly premium mediocre.
It's using Netflix money instead of being on network television.
Mm. Yeah. Well, what about the guy the Kirkman guy, the guy who went down there specifically to make a show out of the whole thing? Like, that guy is like a straight out of central casting, evil Hollywood producer type.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, do you think that maybe his presence like was like an accelerant to the bad shit that was going on?
It's hard to say because, I mean, he did want a producer. So he probably was egged on, but I got the feeling he was egged on by everybody all the time.
Yeah. But there was those scenes where the camera, he even says like when the camera was pointed on him, he would like make a bigger show of like firing somebody or disciplining somebody or something like
Right.
that.
But he did have his own, yeah, totally. But he did have his own show, and he was, a lot of the like firing a weapon at a mannequin representing Carol Baskin was on Joe Exotic's own TV show when his own cameras were running.
I'm surprised that show wasn't bigger. I can't believe all this stuff wasn't on the radar more.
Yeah.
I think there's like when he ran for governor, I guess the Daily Show kind of like picked up the story a little bit, but I mean, this is like Alex Jones with a cat almost,
Yeah. I think something else that this documentary definitely runs into is that both Joe Exotic's compound and Bhagwan Antle, or whatever the fuck his name is, um, they both create these cults around them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, definitely one modeled himself after the other in a sense. Well, actually, Carol Baskin is too, where she's just got these minions, and you
Mm-hmm.
know, I mean, people want to do good, and they'll sacrifice their time and energy and money. But all of these stories are these very large personalities who've surrounded themselves with an institution that will support their mania.
Yeah, I feel like Bhagwan Attal was or Antle or whatever, is the sketchiest of all of them.
He's a creep and a half.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking a lot about creeps, and I don't know what makes someone a creep and someone not a creep, and when is it okay and when is it not okay? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what's the quality and how is it quantified? But
Yeah.
he absolutely is one. He's horrible. Well, so's Jeff Lowe, the guy
Yeah.
who bought in and ousted Exotic from his own failed business.
Yeah. It's very surprising to me how the documentary kind of tiptoes around him a little bit. It has that feel to me, which is like you never really know where his money came from. Like there's this whole thing about him being a con man
Yeah,
or whatever, but like what manner of con? Like does he like take over other people's businesses? Like there's this one scene where he's talking about how like, oh, he has these 2 trailers full of money. It's like, oh, I'd love to get like a cart full of money. So obviously that's like a con man thing where you show somebody all this money and then this person thinks that you can also provide it. I mean, it's kind of a classic con man thing, just flash money around. It's kind of like what
sure.
preachers do. But you still got to lay your hands on that much money somehow. If you told me, hey, if you can get a wheelbarrow full of $5 bills tomorrow or like $100 bills, so we can like cheat this evil person out of money, I couldn't lay my hands on that.
Right.
Like I'm not going to be a successful person. So like what, like, I don't know. There's this weird thing with like black market people where it's like they're either fucking fallen or broke.
My perception of how the filmmakers regarded Jeff Lowe is they perhaps didn't know. They perhaps could not do enough investigating to get any more information about him than they were able to provide in the documentary.
Mm-hmm.
So his representation was slightly ambivalent.
Yeah.
And all we could do is hear other people complain about him, people who had something invested, very, very invested, one way or the other about his character.
Yeah. And the other guys, like the Carol Baskin jokes, they're both trying to film themselves and show themselves off. Like they both have web shows, and like Jeff Lowe, to my knowledge, did not or does not.
Right. The way he goes about the world is he flashes money and cats around in Las Vegas, right?
Mm. Yeah. And then he's supposed to appear in court, I think now or maybe next month or something like that, related to that whole thing about like bringing big cats into hotels and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's so
Which,
weird. It's like in Las Vegas, like go over here and shoot automatic weapons. Okay. Go pet a cub in a room. Not okay.
yeah.
Like gamble away all of your money and like mortgage your house and destroy your marriage, but pet a cat, no fucking way. I mean,
Yeah.
it's so weird.
Oh, speaking of that sort of thing and weapons, I think that another layer to the way that this documentary represents the South is these are not good gun owners, right?
No,
Like,
no,
and not only
no.
are they not good gun owners, when anti-gun liberals complain about guns, they're like, someone's going to get killed. Well, in this documentary, someone gets killed, like
Oh, yeah.
in the most stereotypically fearful way that when people are anti-gun, that's exactly what they're thinking of.
It's exactly what they're thinking of. I mean, and the reality is like, I'm totally pro gun. I'm a full on like 2A sort of dude. But to me, what comes along with that is there's this sort of like almost like a Victorian prudishness around firearm stuff. Like if you listen to the NRA rules, like, I mean, like everybody thinks of the NRA as this big evil organization, but like a large part of it is just firearms training and education, there's like these, you should never point a gun at anything you're not willing to destroy. Like that's one of the rules, and especially your own fucking head. And it's just interesting. It's like dudes like that are why we can't get certain models of handguns in California, because that whole thing about like removing the magazine and the weapon still being able to fire, that's a safety issue. And that you see exactly in the film, exactly what the problem is. And firearms manufacturers have to include safety devices on guns if they're going to be sold in California. And so basically like after a certain date, a firearm and a pistol in California, if you drop the magazine, it's not supposed to be able to be fired. It's why you can't get certain generations of Glocks. And then on one hand, you're like, well, if you follow the rules, you don't need all that dumb bullshit. And then the other hand, it's like, well, there's fucking idiots out there, so it drives me crazy too, like seeing people do that dumb shit.
It's amazing.
Or then also just like the director says that Joe Exotic just straight up shot a chicken when you just pointed a guy out and just shot it. It's like, well, fuck, man, what the hell? What are you doing?
Jesus.
I mean, just.
Well, I hope he fed it to a cat.
Yeah, man, it's funny, like part of me was like very disdainful of this film, but there are moments in it that are so fucking crazy. You just find yourself going, what the fuck? Like the whole expired meat donation thing.
So fascinating.
Yeah, it's weird because it's like clearly big cats don't want to be living off of like nitrate filled processed meat.
Yes.
Like, that's not their jam. But the cold cow thing and the cold horse thing makes total sense. But then the fact that they used all that expired meat for the pizzas, it's just like
for those ugly ass broke ass pizzas.
Oh, it just has a funny. It's like full on Upton Sinclair. It's just like this despicable, terrible thing. And it's exactly when people complain about like libertarian fantasies. That's exactly what people are talking about. Like, I don't need no regulation. You can't tell me what to do. That's how you end up with fucking expired meat pizzas sold in a cat zoo. Like, that's exactly the problem. It's interesting. Like, Joe, I guess like the more I think about it, as much as I don't like the existence of this documentary, like I have thought quite a bit about Joe Exotic. Like, I mean, as a character, he brings up a lot of stuff. Like, for example, no one gives a fuck that he's gay. At all. No one that works around him or whatever, like it's not even a thing. And in my experience in the South, this is largely how it is. People don't give a fuck. Like, whereas everywhere else thinks, you're going to get dragged to death if you're like, I just 2 days ago saw somebody I know that lives in New York who is gay, who wanted to drive to California and was worried about driving through the middle of the country being gay. I was like, dude, it is not a factor in most places. Like, most people do not give a fuck. And in this documentary, it also is not a thing. What's weird, though, is that there's all this kind of like, whoa, these guys are straight. It's like, I thought we were past that, like this whole fucking caring about what people did. And I thought we had fluid gender, but the documentary makes such a big deal out of these like presumably straight dudes living with Joe Exotic. Like, I thought that was very interesting too. Like there's something weird about it. Like, look, there's either nothing weird about it, or there's everything that weird about it.
Well, he's got a type. 3 of his husbands were straight guys he met when they were 19.
Yes.
Like, he has a type.
It reminds me of that Joe Rogan bit about how he doesn't believe there's bisexuals. There's just guys who haven't realized they're gay yet, or really gullible straight dudes who ran into crafty gay guys.
That's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just a bit from like the early 2000s, so I'm not going to defend it. But yeah, it's the other thing that was kind of in our modern gender world that we live in is the character who I thought was just a lesbian with one arm, I guess is a trans man. And then the documentary pretty much misgenders that character through the whole thing. And I've only seen like, it's so interesting how the world changes so much. I only saw like the only reason why I even know that is because I saw one article, I think on Huffington Post. But if this has happened 4 months ago, I'm sure there would be a hashtag boycott Netflix thing going on.
Yeah.
Over the crime of misgendering. And it's not cool to do that sort of thing, but it's interesting how like no one seems to give a fuck about that. Whereas a couple months ago, people would have been right on top of that shit.
Absolutely.
And to anyone who's listening to this far in the future, we're currently locked down from the coronavirus.
Yes, and that's why the quality of audio is so poor compared to our regular episodes.
I know. We're like fucking, like those awesome music studios that crank out the great albums of the 60s and 70s. Usually now we're just some SoundCloud rapper sounding shit.
For sure.
We've been laid low.
Lo-fi SoundCloud.
Ugh.
I watched maybe 3 YouTube videos about this, but then I realized, Jesus Christ, I already just spent 7 episodes on this shit. I just don't want these people in my life anymore. So
Yeah, I didn't look at any commentary that anyone had about the show at all. Like I was just like, I don't want to talk about I don't want to see what somebody else has. I mean, and if you're listening to us, thanks. You definitely
exactly. We're just
doing
contributing to the problem.
Yeah, we're for sure contributing to the problem, but we're also trying to keep the show moving along in the lockdown, and it seems like kind of a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, we did Bird Box, so we might as well do this. And I can't remember, did I frame it in our previous episode? I feel like this is just Bird Box 2.0.
Yeah,
It's a meme that spiraled, like, oh, you got to see this thing, and suddenly everybody saw it. And how good or necessary it is far below the energy we gave to it just because of the novelty of it.
Yeah. I mean, I watched it solely because I'd seen so many memes that looked really funny that I wanted to kind of understand the memes more. Like that's kind of why I watched Bird Box, which I knew would be trash.
Yep.
And one of the things that's really funny is how people were like, oh, they have a genius marketing campaign just getting people to do memes. You kind of can't just get people to just do memes. I mean, Michael Bloomberg just lost $700 million under that hypothesis.
What do you mean?
Like the idea that you can just like whip up enthusiasm through memes and internet humor, right? Like you can, but like you can't really control it. You know what I mean? It's like the internet chooses. You don't get the internet to do it. So if you gave me, like, for example, Michael Bloomberg, he had unlimited pockets, and then he tried to hire all these influencers and bloggers and internet people because he was like, look, Donald Trump had meme magic. I'm going to buy meme magic.
Right.
And it turns out you can't buy meme magic. It has to manifest on its own, which I think is really interesting.
That's another parallel between Donald Trump and Joe Exotic, is that Joe Exotic is a troll.
Yeah.
Somehow he's the hero of this movie in the popular imagination, but he's literally a troll. He spends time online threatening and lying.
Yeah. He's not as good at it as our president, though.
Nobody is. And this is the world we live in.
I know, man. It's so crazy. Do you know who Jimmy Dore is?
No.
So he's like I guess he's a comedian. I'm not familiar with him. I guess he's a comedian, and he's kind of a political dude. And he was on the Young Turks for a while, and I think they had some sort of split. So his thing now is he plays like news clips of the day in front of a live studio audience, and he's kind of like a Bernie guy, but now he feels betrayed by Bernie, so he's kind of turning against him, and he hates Joe Biden. But he's a hardcore lefty dude, right? He's basically kind of like a Bernie bro type. But he was playing clips. He was basically he was talking about how Joe Rogan said that Trump was going to destroy Biden, and everybody was up in arms about that. And so he started playing these clips of Trump during the first Republican debates, like when he was on stage ripping the other candidates down. Dude, some of that shit was so fucking funny and like hilarious. Like he basically like calls one dude like super boring, and he says the other guy's a mama's boy. I mean, like you're on stage for the presidential election and you're like roast battling people. I mean, the dude's comic timing. It is going to be trouble for Biden, man, when it comes time to debate. That's as political as I want to get. But I'm actually kind of looking forward to the spectacle of it, which I guess makes me as bad as these Tiger King fans. What is that? Like, you do sort of like, I am kind of attracted to a fucked up spectacle, as I think a lot of people are.
Yeah. The weird thing, though, is when you get that much freedom, and I am in no way framing that much freedom as the problem, but like when people are that free and that wild, it so often comes with these fucking issues that he was a polygamist and one of his husbands accidentally shot himself in the head. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what happens in the Wild West. That's what you get.
You know, it's kind of weird. They're all three of the tiger like people are sort of like polygamists. Like Doc Antle is for sure a polygamist, and then Carol Baskin, she's like a serial monogamist, which is kind of in the territory of being a polygamist, I guess. Yeah, I mean, in
What?
a weird sort of way.
I don't know
Well, I
about
mean, it's
that.
a she's gone through as many husbands as Joe Exotic has, just one at a time, I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of a bad.
That's pretty
That's bad.
different. That's pretty different, Chad.
It's pretty different. Um,
She's a
well, anyway.
polygamist, but one at a time.
Well, anyway, Doc Mantle or Antle or whatever the fuck his name is, that fucking weirdo. He is for sure. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something about having big cats. It's like you're like, man, I got big dick energy and I got to spread it around.
uh, uh,
Yeah. If you could own a farm full of any exotic animal, what would it be?
I don't know. I don't really care about animals like that.
Mm,
It's just not engaging to me. They're dirty and they smell.
yeah.
I mean, maybe just, if I could have 200 acres and just wild horses and they can just fucking do their thing and I'll leave them alone and they can leave me alone. All I really
Mm,
want is a golden retriever, just enough land to have a golden retriever. That's all I really want animal wise.
yeah.
I don't care about animals.
Yeah.
Why? What about you?
I mean, if I could have a herd of elephants, I think that would be pretty badass. Like, have you ever been to the Natural History Museum in New York and they have those like 12 taxidermied elephants?
No.
Like, it's kind of like one of their most famous exhibits. I think like maybe even like Teddy Roosevelt shot one of them or something like that. But they have like these 12 like perfectly taxidermied, like they're all running in a group elephants and there's like a baby or two and there's like some adults. And just, it is so striking to see. And then when I've seen elephants in zoos and stuff, like they just seem to me like the coolest animal. And then I don't know, just having a whole bunch of them, like a bunch of war elephants, that shit would be great.
Yeah, it'd be like the movie 300, but you.
Yeah, I would dress them up like Hannibal's animals. You know, like when he came across the out, came across the wherever to kill whoever.
Oh God. In the zombie apocalypse, if you like had your own herd of elephants, you'd be unstoppable.
Yeah.
While we're asking questions, so if you were to make a documentary series
Mm-hmm.
with or without Netflix, and exploitation was not even on your mind, you don't care about representation or anything like that. Who or what would you make a documentary about?
The thing that I would really want to make a documentary about, and it would be very difficult to do, like if I could just do anything, is the Chinese treatment of the Uyghurs, like which is the Muslim minority in China, is so fucked up. And like whenever I hear somebody like be like, "Oh, we can't talk shit about the Chinese government," because whatever, it's like, dude, everything we like about Chinese culture and people is pre-communist government shit. You know what I mean? Like General or Post, like General Sal's is not from wherever. All the awesome Chinese people in our lives are not communists. And like what they're doing to that ethnic minority is unbelievably fucked up. And then like 10, 15 years from now, we're going to look at it like, Serbian, Bosnian fighting, or it's a fucking genocide. It's a crime. And I would love to do a documentary about that if I was going to do anything.
Yeah.
Or if I was going to do something fun, Black Cowboys. I'm completely fascinated by there's this whole subculture of like, and there's like a group that live in Oakland. And you see them with their horses every once in a while, but the whole culture of Black Cowboys is super interesting to me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That reminds me of a friend of mine was in Detroit some years ago and went to a gay Black club for line dancing night.
Huh.
And is in Detroit. Super rough, super intense place. But yeah, gay black line dancing bar. And I guess there was a sign that if you got in a fight, you'd be banned for 2 weeks. And if you were in a fight using a weapon, you're banned for 2 months.
Seems reasonable.
Can you imagine you like knife someone and then after 2 months, they're like, all right, we're good.
Yeah. I wonder how much of that they have.
Well, I would imagine enough that they have to put up a sign, but the community is a solid enough community that they need to make people know that everybody's welcome.
Yeah. I mean, everybody I know who's gay and black is fucking tough. And they got that way from the way they grew up. So I imagine if you had an all gay black bar, there's probably some fucking dudes in there that know how to throw their hands, you know?
Yeah, yep.
Well, what about you? What would you do a documentary on?
It's not too salacious or anything like that, but I sort of wish there was a documentary series about the history of cults in Northern California. And using cults in the widest sense. So, and that can mean hippies who just went and started communes that got out of hand to, I mean, you go across the Golden Gate Bridge and the weirdest shit has been done in the name of alternative spirituality.
Oh, yeah.
It holds so much fascination for me. There's something about up there that makes people fucking insane.
Yeah. Well, two things. One, I'd like to recommend the podcast Martyr Made by this guy named Daryl Cooper. And it's kind of a history podcast. Like he did like the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He does like a really good job with it. But he has his most recent series is on the Jonestown massacre. And he goes super deep into like everything about it. It's very good. And he's about to do a new show with Jocko Willink, the Navy SEAL guy. So that give you an idea of the sort of the tone and direction of it. But the dude's really interesting. He was in the Navy. He's a total autodidact. Reads like 6 hours a day. Like a very, very interesting dude.
Can you say the title of that podcast again?
Martyr Made.
Monitor?
Martyr
Made. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah. It's funny. He talks about how like people can't hear what it is all the time when people mention their own podcasts. And I also didn't hear it right the first time I heard it. And it was kind of, but I realized I had already listened to his previous podcast, was Decline of the West, which was kind of a deep dive into the Oswald Spengler book. And the guy Dominic, Literary Libations, the guy that he does a podcast with, Hypermodernity on YouTube, David Ebert, he did the original show with Daryl Cooper. So it's kind of like these connection points. But like, I'm really kind of a big fan of Daryl Cooper and Martyr Made.
Yeah. I mean, just the history of America is a series of fucking crazy ass shit. And it is super fascinating. So like Tiger King is kind of exploitative, kind of gross. I fucking hate everyone in the documentary except for the trans man with the missing arm. I feel like he was just chill, whatever, just kind of,
I feel like the whole zoo staff.
Yeah, fair.
Is like, I mean, I worked in probably the roughest group of people I worked around in my whole life. I worked at a concert venue for a little bit, unloading trucks for concerts. So if you're like No Doubt or U2 and you show up with like a bunch of trucks, I was part of a crew of people who would roll the shit off of the trucks and into the area where the union people would take over and set everything up. So we were just loaders is what we were. And it was a group of mutants just like that, like missing teeth, fucking long scraggly hair, but they're all decent people, very fucked up, like a lot like my family. Like I kind of grew up around people like that. So I don't know. Felt a little close to home. Because I grew up with all kinds of weird animals and shit. Like my dad, he was, when he was a teenager, from being about 14 to when he went to the Vietnam War in his late teens, early 20s, he worked at a rare animals import business in Manhattan. and you could go in there and get a fucking tiger, a vampire bat, a monkey, like you can get whatever. So I kind of am like around a little bit of the Tiger King sort of like vibe. Like my dad, he's just a little kid. He would basically be like one of the employees of the Tiger King. But same thing, the guy who owned the business was just a wild, charismatic dude that he kind of just fell under the spell of and ended up being friends with for years until they had a falling out. And then I think my dad might have tried to like shoot him or something crazy. But
Jesus Christ.
like there was definitely something really bad happened. Like there was some embezzling or something like that with a business that they had started together. But so when I was watching this Tiger King, I was like, man, how close to this shit? How close was I to living in a place like this?
Yeah.
But I mean, I have a picture of my dad when he's like 15 years old holding a cheetah.
God.
It's just interesting.
Yep. One other random thing. I can't help but think of collecting is a retro act at this point. Just the very notion of collecting objects.
Mm-hmm.
And so this documentary is a lens into one of the most extreme ends of a dying obsession that we've had in late capitalism. To consume in the rise of capitalism had to do with quality, and then it kind of turned to signification, right? What do consumer goods signify for you? And now we're in a time where consumption is less and less tied to physical commodities.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's super interesting. Yeah, because he's like, I mean, I saw one thing that basically talked about him being an animal hoarder. And then Carol Baskin also be like they're basically, they have their income from it, but there's like a weird, like how do you end up with 200 fucking tigers? You know what I mean? Especially when you're allowed to just euthanize your animals whenever you want. Like I could take my little dog here off my lap and throw him out in the yard and shoot him if I wanted to. And it's not illegal as far as I know. I mean, like animals are considered property. And I mean, I think it's pretty fucked up. I'd be bummed out if I saw my neighbor shoot their dog, I would probably go beat their ass. But I think I would probably be the one leaving in handcuffs after that, not him.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what Joe Exotic's in jail for, is like shooting some tigers. Like, the whole thing about the economy of cub petting, which is they're only useful for a few years. It's just like chimpanzee actors. Like you can only really be a TV chimpanzee for like 2 years. And then you're a violent, raging primate after that.
Right.
That's why Michael Jackson had to get rid of the bubbles on the down low.
We got some questions and topics on Instagram. You posted, and some people had some things to say. Do you want to read them? Do you have them? I've got them in front of me.
Yeah, I have them right here. There's one, House of Caution said, how about how it's a disorganized mess? I completely agree. I think it's kind of a shitty documentary and gives people the opportunity to look down on others with a capital O. And I think we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the show in the context of like looking down on the South. But one of the reasons why I think I've been so naturally okay with the world going to like not making fun of people for being gay or whatever, or like all that stuff, it always made sense to me because I was always a weird fucking kid and I'm like a weird adult. So to point at and make fun of other people has always seemed fucked up to me. And when I see a documentary like this that seems to kind of like do that, I just fucking hate it. And so I agree. I agree with that question statement.
Yep. And then Dominic from Literary Libations said something to the effect of looking down on millionaires who make their money off of exploiting wild animals, which I think is also kind of fair.
Yeah, and he clarifies too, like where I don't think like the money really matters and think about Grey Gardens, right? Like those people sort of had, even though they're like, they don't really have money, like they're of means, I guess. And you look at them like they're weird. I guess you don't have to be poor to be looked down on. Like you can have money and still be on the outside.
Yeah.
And that happens. I mean, that's the story of Judaism. In some ways,
right?
Constant being others. But yeah, like I guess there's documentaries that were like the other is considered like endearing and sweet. And I definitely prefer that kind of documentary. Like there's like when a movie revels in the sweetness of a weirdo, I just really, really like that quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
E. Optimus wrote, please talk about their horrible tattoos. Like Joe's Peck tiger tattoo was actually pretty decent quality, but Travis's was terrible. Like, why not just go to the same artist?
Yeah. Well, my buddy Elisa, she has some great tattoos, and she's a tattoo fan and also an artist. So I can see why that rankled her. But the tattoo cover up that's not actually a cover up
I
is to me
love
the
that.
one.
The best part of the documentary for me.
I mean, it's like, what are you fucking doing? Like, just throw some roses around that fucking thing or whatever, you know? Like what the fuck is going on? To just leave parts of the sentences. It's like when you see a guitar case and has a whole bunch of stickers, and one sticker is like over another sticker. It's so weird to me. But yeah, I don't know. I do kind of like that the tattoos, they're not cool, and they definitely mark these people as sort of pirates. Like there's just like they seem to like have real outlaw tattoos. You know, there's no irony. It's not like a stick and poke Instagram influencer thing, or you know.
But what's funny is, again, it comes back to that question of pretense and play acting and irony. Is that you know, everybody's got tattoos now. Tattoos are, you know, sexy, beautiful, and delicate on some people. And the sort of like renegade pirate tattoo thing it's a look, but it's not actually, you know, again, it's similar to riding a Harley Davidson doesn't make you an outlaw. It's just a signifier of being an outlaw. You can be an outlaw and have a motorcycle, but that's just sort of it's just cosplay. And so when are you cosplaying your actual identity? You know?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's kind of funny. Like the people who have $30,000 Harley Davidsons are like generally like one of two kinds of person. You're a dentist with a bunch of money and you weren't cool when you were young, or it's the only thing you have because it's the only thing you care about. And you're like a roofer and you don't fucking own anything except for a fridge full of Miller Lite and a fucking Harley Evo. Like, or not Evo, but like a Rogue Rider or something like that, you know?
Yep.
It's just like, it's pretty funny. Then the other part of like the whole cosplay thing is the Chopper cosplay uniform. It's just like, okay, we're all individuals wearing plaid shirts and bands and beards and retro helmets.
Love it.
Yeah, and it's funny like how there are these off the shelf rebellions, and then when you see a true rebellion, which is somebody like a Carol Baskin or a Joe Exotic or you know a Doc Antle living this weirdo fucking polygamy life, it's like people want to point at and judge that sort of thing. It's like you can be a rebel as long as it's a certain type of like pre-decided rebel, like a prefab rebellion.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, I mean, think about punk. 1978, punk was terrifying to people. People thought that this would be the end of America, the end of Britain. It was terrifying, and now it's just fucking adorable, and you can wear your CBGB's pink T-shirt to the gym. You know, same with biker gangs were deemed so horrifying and destructive, but yeah, it's just an off-the-shelf form of rebellion, and this kind of shit is scary because it's scary. Like a bunch of guys who don't give a fuck waving their guns around and have absolutely no regard for the law. That's what rebellion looks like. You're not supposed to like it. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable. They don't care. That's the point.
To me, that makes what they're doing closer to art. One of the best lines Joe Exotic has, speaking of art, is when he's like, man, if they kind of try to take my tigers, it's going to be another Waco in here. They're like, fuck, so good.
Jesus. More from Instagram. Wes Wellenbring pasted a link to an article in vegnews.com. New undercover footage shows Tiger King stars brutally abusing animals. Yeah, probably. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I watched that video, and definitely, like, I'm certainly not ever going to hit a tiger with a stick. But if you want to get a tiger to do something, I think that's kind of how you have to do it. And I like the footage wasn't as crazy as I was as expecting it to be. To me, it's far beyond anything that anyone should do to a tiger ever. But I mean, I think like the worst thing is like somebody like punches a cat in the nose, which, you know, I don't know. Cats can be assholes, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's back to the animal rights thing. It's like I feel like there shouldn't be big cat zoos like that around. But then again, I've been to like the circus, and it's kind of magical when you're a little kid, you know. And then it's probably why I love elephants today and give money to elephant rescues, because I saw an elephant do a cool thing when I was a little kid. Yep. So I don't know. Don't have an answer.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Dominic, Literary Libations, also said.
Yeah. Well, Dominic also said, you know, I might want to mention how a guy like me, who's so far left, I voted for Nader and Sanders and was a vegetarian for 12 years, would definitely vote for Joe Exotic for governor. Well, as somebody who the only time I've voted in my adult life was for Schwarzenegger for governor, I get it. You know, there's just something about, but when you don't trust the government and you think that it's a bunch of self-serving shitheads looking out for themselves and their friends, which it seems to be the case in governments all over the world, that that's what it is, you know, why not have a fucking mutant? But that's also how you get a Donald Trump. So
yeah,
like, I don't know what to say about that. But then in retrospect, Schwarzenegger wasn't a terrible governor, and he's kind of become a star of the COVID-19 stay-at-home response with his two little horses. You know?
Yeah. And then our buddy from Escape Samsara has the last comment, which is, why on earth did all these supposed criminals, cult leaders, and con artists go on to record and tell everything that happened? I'm a journalist, and people won't go on record about what holiday they took last year, let alone how they traded in illegal animals. I think it's ego. I think, well, especially
100%.
Like, they're all just, I mean, again, it's like, speaking of Donald Trump, it's a fascinating thing about him is that he constantly is digging himself into a hole every time he opens his mouth, but the repercussions are zero, so it doesn't matter. Like, you know, it doesn't matter how many times John Oliver does a segment on the lies that he tells. It doesn't matter how many times Sam Harris complains about him. There are no repercussions to Donald Trump's lies and insanity and self-contradictions. So,
well, that reminds me of how hedge funds acted, where like you were like, you know, shorting these government-backed loans or whatever it was. It's been a long time since I read The Big Short, so I don't quite remember exactly how it worked. But basically, if you could go into the casino and never lose, you would only ever make big crazy bets. Yeah. You know, like, and of course, like if you could say whatever the fuck you wanted on TV anytime and you could never lose, you're going to be a wild dude. Like, why wouldn't you be? You know, like if you knew that you could never lose your job, never get your ass beat, and no one could ever really fuck with you, how much worse do you think you would act in public?
Well, I think that most people would probably believe they would still be a decent human being, but history shows us that that's not what happens.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, like it goes back to the classic philosophy thing, the ring of Gyges, which is like if you had a ring that you could turn invisible, what would you do that would be virtuous? And ultimately, when you have like an ultimate power like that, it's hard to think of what you would do that was virtuous. Like at best, you would maybe do violence for a noble cause. Like, and I was thinking about this is like if I had all of Superman's powers, like right now, I snap my fingers and could do whatever I want, I would get up to fucking mayhem within 30 minutes. You know, I would be doing all kinds of crazy shit.
I think I wouldn't be up to mayhem in 30 seconds. I think what would inevitably happen is I would probably eventually just completely lose perspective on what right and wrong is.
Yeah,
You
it
know,
would be
and
hard because the first thing I would do is I would fly over to North Korea and throw Kim Jong Un into the fucking moon. Like
yeah,
that would be the first thing I would do with Superman's powers, and then probably for a few months I would try to do the plot of Superman 4, which is to get nuclear weapons and shit out in space. But after that, I would just start fucking laser beaming with my eyes any injustice I saw. Like you throw a fucking Swisher Street Sweet package on the floor, I'm gonna light your fucking Nikes up.
I think that we're in this time where it's very tiresome that so many superhero plots are having their dark turn, even Superman. But
Mhm.
it's hard to see reality as being other than that.
Yeah, the dark comic thing, like the dark future, like it is really fucking tired. Like Alan Moore basically kicked it off with The Watchmen,
Yep.
and Frank Miller at the same time with The Dark Knight Returns, which those are both just maybe the best comics, like period, like those two things. But they were both. Alan Moore was kind of like, man, this is the mic drop. Like that's it. Like we shouldn't keep wallowing in the misery of these characters. This is just an idea of like what these people would really be like in the real world, but they don't live in there. And this is Grant Morrison's critique of Alan Moore, which is like, yeah, but these characters don't live in the real world. Their job is to uplift us and be gods, which is why Grant Morrison's All-Star Superman is so great, because Superman is kind of like this Jesus character, and he saves the world because he is so ultimately good and cool. But a human with those powers, like a regular ass dude, would never be cool. Like there's no way you could be cool. Like, because you would want to go fight some injustice, and the no story is clean. Like you would find out, like, I don't know, like this dude was in the Klan and he killed somebody. Well, I'm going to go do justice. Like, okay, now I've killed him. His like mother-in-law is going to die alone. I mean, there's always like
Exactly.
these, like, external, like it's like, what do you do? There's no way to stop it. Like you can't punch your. I don't know. I was going to say you can't punch your way into a better world, but you kind of can.
Well, if you've got the biggest fists and it's your world, your vision of the world, yeah, sure.
Yeah, but I mean, but then the whole thing of like, oh, but that's kind of like almost like a paralyzing idea too, because I was listening to Jocko Willink's first appearance on Joe Rogan's show pretty recently. For some reason, I hadn't listened to it since it came out. It's interesting because it's his second major interview before he ever has a podcast, and I think one of the things that's so refreshing about that dude and people like him, and maybe even to a certain extent the Joe Exotic character, is there's no waffling. Like Joe Rogan's like, well, what do you think about ISIS? And he's like, they're fucking savages. They need to be destroyed. If I could eradicate every single one of them on the planet, I would. And then you can imagine somebody being like, well, what about the geopolitical conditions and what the United States did with the CIA to destabilize the region? Like, you could keep walking that back into this
Right.
chain of paralysis. But he's just like, no, these motherfuckers raped 8-year-old girls and shot my friends, so they all have to fucking die. And there's just something refreshing about that point of view. I mean, like the COVID-19 thing is sort of bringing people back to that a little bit. I mean, pretty much all nauseous virtue signaling has kind of disappeared. Like the internet is back to just memes and political shit. But it's not about like, I don't know. I mean, maybe that's wrong. Maybe I'm just looking in the wrong places. But it seems like with this major, huge, terrible threat that people have to address, like people aren't so concerned with calling out some actress for inappropriately wearing a Chinese outfit that she happened to just like, but is apparently cultural appropriation. You know what I mean? Like,
Yep.
that sort of thing. There's like a clarity. It's like when something is really fucked up, whether it be a person or a situation, it pushes away the things that aren't that essential. Like I'm reading this book called About Face, which is considered like probably the best war memoir of all time. And it's just like that. Like there's these scenes of battle that are just so raw. And the book was written a long time ago. So he's using the language of the time. So he's like, we went over this, hill and we shot 30 gooks. And you're like, whoa, like that's like, now to your modern ear, that sounds totally fucking crazy. but in its context or even in the battle, like you wouldn't even think twice about somebody saying something fucked up like that. You know, I don't know. I mean, I don't really have a point with that. I guess it's just, people want to police language a lot less when there's other things to police, I guess.
Right. No, it's all very clarifying.
Yeah, I feel really spun from this whole thing. Like at first, my first 2 weeks, and by this whole thing, I mean being locked inside for like a month. But I feel like my quality of thought, and if you're listening to this far, you can probably tell that I'm like totally all over the place more than usual. I just haven't been able to think very clearly. Like, have you had that experience or no?
No.
No? Weird. Yeah.
No, I mean, I definitely have a lot of anxiety, but I think I'm about as clear-headed and muddled in equal parts like I always am.
Yeah.
So what have we learned?
I mean, I guess we learned don't start a tiger zoo.
Unless you want to.
Yeah, I guess it's the thing. Unless you want to, like, if you, I mean, like that sort of thing. I find it hard to wag my finger at any of these, even though I don't like the idea of roadside zoos, because I think they're mostly just because they're probably just not done very well. I think that the health of the animals is not as good as it should be. Like my friend Beth works for the Chicago Zoo, and they have one of these new hippie zoos where it's like some animals are so well treated that they don't even let people see them. And you're like,
Nice.
well, what's going on here? Is it a zoo or not a zoo? And I think, like, I don't know, like, should someone be able to have a big dangerous animal if they want to? Like, I mean, who am I to say no?
The one comment that was made in the documentary about this, and I think it was Bhagwan Antle of all people, and I hate to refer to him as being a voice of reason, but he made some comment about, well, they're not breeding in the wild. Of course, we have to breed them or there wouldn't be any.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really solid point.
It's hard to argue against that. I mean, it's ignoring the treatment of them and that they should be in the wild and they are not domesticated and all, et cetera, et cetera. But the closing title cards states how many are in the wild. Like, I think it said 4,000 tigers are in the wild, 5 to 10,000 are in America in zoos. That alone feels slightly like a case for having zoos in America,
Yeah, I mean, and then like people own house cats. I mean, if a house cat was 50 pounds, it would fucking kill you. You know what I mean? Like, it's basically the same instincts. It's just not big enough to fuck you up.
Yep.
Bogdan, or Doc Antle, he sort of reminds me of like a really soft core Cormac McCarthy character, and that he has like a very logical evil about him. Like that statement, I don't find anything really, like, it's not an incorrect statement,
Yep.
And then it reminds me of another animal guy, although he shoots and eats them, is the guy that does the TV show Meat Eater, who's his name, I can't remember his name right now, but he said that certain animals are just what he considers charismatic megafauna, which is like people, for whatever reason, largely Disney movies, give a fuck about certain animals and could give zero fucks about other animals.
Yes.
For example, there's a fire in the movie in Tiger King that kills a whole bunch of alligators. No one gives a fuck. I haven't seen a single meme or comment or whatever about this dude possibly burned down his own studio and killed a whole bunch of alligators. If one fucking golden retriever had been killed like that, you know what I mean? It would be like, people would be all over his ass. But it's an alligator, so nobody gives a shit.
Yep.
It's just interesting to me, like a bunch of alligators die, but people care about the cats.
Yep. We like mammals.
Yeah, people are into mammals. Unless you're making shoes, then it's reptiles all the way.
So maybe we should just encourage people to reach out, send us an email at scarythoughts.org. Tell us what we should do while we're all in captivity, in cages ourselves. What should we cover next? What should we talk about?
Yeah.
Any last thoughts?
Well, I guess my last thought would be, now that Joe Exotic is in jail, apparently he's had some sort of like conversion about having, he's like, oh, I would never keep an animal in a cage now that I've been in a cage. It's interesting how when the shoe's on the other foot, it doesn't feel so good.
Good for him.
Yeah.
Well, he probably won't have to do all of his 22 years because apparently Donald Trump is considering giving him a pardon or something.
No, well, do you know the backstory on that?
Not a clue.
Okay, so Donald Trump Jr. is a bit like Donald Trump Jr. From what I understand, is a pretty like funny dude to be around. Like he's a humorous guy. I don't know. I'm making no claims. I know he shoots animals and stuff. He's a dickhead. He's related to Donald Trump, so he's evil. I get all that. But he's on Jim Norton's show, the comedian Jim Norton show, and I haven't heard him on it, but I guess he keeps going back on the show because he's a good, interesting guest. But Jim Norton asked him if his dad would pardon Joe Exotic, just kind of as a joke. And then Donald Trump Jr. was like, yeah, it'd be hilarious if he did it, just because could you imagine the media would freak out so bad? Like Donald Trump Jr. seems to really understand like the way media works,
Yeah.
In this dark age. And then some journalist got that story and then went and straight up like asked. I mean, it's so fucking crazy to me that you could have, you're a journalist, presumably at the top of your game because you're at the White House asking questions, and there's some really serious shit going on right now. And then your one question you're going to ask the president is about a fucking gay tiger wrangler. I mean, it's fucking madness. It's like, what are you doing? That's why people don't trust the media. Is like, we're hearing about, what's going to kill me? Am I ever going to be able to go back to work? What the fuck's going on? Are you going to pardon the fucking Tiger King? I mean, give me a fucking break. I mean, to me, that's more egregious than if Donald Trump actually pardoned him.
Yeah.
Which is like, then I was thinking about it, it was like, that would suck up so much media attention that Donald Trump could probably sell California and then do that story, and that story would take, I mean, that's totally an extreme example, but he could do something fucked up, pardon Joe Exotic the next day, and then that would be the news cycle for like a month.
For sure.
Yeah. I don't know. That's it. I feel like I've been very ranty on this episode. Ranty and unfocused.
We love it.
Ugh.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Stay healthy. And we'll see you next time for whatever we're covering next.
Yep. Don't fuck with cats.
Please don't.
Which I think is actually a show. Never mind.
Oh, God. We didn't talk about that documentary.
Let's not.
Oh, it's brutal.
All right.
Okay. Bye, everybody. Thanks.
Later.
Fuck it. I don't know. Shit. I had something else to say and it's gone. Whatever.